when we dig into the data and try and understand it and make sense of it, we think what it's really telling us is that people miss the sense of belonging. They miss the sense of context that comes with an office environment.
Wow.
And in particular, if you think about Gen Z, so they've joined this organization during the pandemic. They were working remotely.
Yeah.
And in many cases, they did not know what it was like to work in an office environment with other people.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another knowledge bomb episode of Lead to Greatness, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential and together change the world. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Denis O'Shea, the founder of Mobile Mentor. If this is your first time joining us, please consider subscribing and hit that notification bell and hit that like button. This will be greatly appreciated in helping getting out this content to great leaders and great individuals like yourself. Denis founded Mobile Mentor in 2004. Since then, the company has helped millions of people unlock the full potential of their technology. In 2017, Denis moved to Nashville, Tennessee to launch the company's U.S. business with a focus on securing the mobile workforce in industries such as healthcare, education, finance, and government services. Mobile Mentor is a global leader in the endpoint ecosystem, helping clients to navigate the right balance between security and employee experience. Please help me welcome Denis with leading the Gen Z workforce. Cedric Francis, and you're listening to Lead to Greatness.
So the company is called Mobile Mentor, and I set it up in 2004 explicitly to help people with technology. And so back in 2004, you might remember it was really difficult to set up a smartphone. Absolutely. And get your calendar syncing, get your email working, get your music on it, and get all that working. Yeah. Well, we helped 1 million people to get their smartphones up and running. That's how we started. And from there, we got into helping organizations who have lots of different devices, laptops and tablets and smartphones. Nowadays, what we're doing is helping organizations who kind of fit into this hybrid workforce. Mm-hmm. You've got some people who work remotely, some who work in the office, some who are traveling again. They need to be secure on all their devices, and they need to be productive wherever they are. And we help organizations get that balance right between security and productivity, make sure that they're not going to get hacked, and make sure that their employees can work wherever they are and be really efficient. Wow. So essentially, we're an IT managed service provider, but with a twist, with that really strong focus on security and the employee experience. We are right now, a lot of the work we're doing is around helping organizations go passwordless. So that means getting rid of passwords. Wow. Which is an interesting one, because if you think about it, passwords were invented in 1961. They were a great invention back then. And then in 2021, we all found out that passwords were the primary reason that companies were getting hacked, and that the primary reason for ransomware. So there's a big global movement right now to go passwordless and get away from this, legacy habit we all have of collecting lots of passwords and storing lots of passwords and putting ourselves at risk every time we type passwords. And so a lot of the work we're doing is helping our clients go passwordless. And we're also helping them to be able to set up new devices like laptops and tablets and smartphones without ever touching them. So in the past, it was a dreadfully painful process. If you joined a company, usually took about 3 days to get your laptop fully configured and up and running and all your software on it. And we're now working with technology that enables us to do that in minutes without all the pain that was required in the past.
Explain that to us, being passwordless.
So picture a future where you could join an organization, you could join a new company, and instead of having to set up different passwords for all the different applications and softwares and tools you use, you might have one password on day one, or preferably none. So the future state is that you'll join an organization and say, your temporary passcode is 7425. And you might use it the very first time you get into a machine and log into something, but then it will scan your face, it will scan your fingerprints, it will listen to your voice, and then it will send you some codes and verify you and check your social and all that. And now it's got a clear view of, this is Cedric. This is the real Cedric. Wow. And we can validate and verify that in 5 different ways. And from then on, you would never again have to type a password. Because when you sit in front of a laptop or a desktop or a tablet or a smartphone, it'll scan your face. It'll probably take 300,000 data points from your face and say, hey, this is Cedric. We know for sure this is Cedric because no one else has a face just like him.
Wow.
And that signs you into the operating system. And, you've seen this on iPhones, right? You pick it up, it looks at you, it signs you in. Now you're signed into the iOS operating system. Well, any apps you have on that device that are trusted apps, you probably have single sign-on.
Yeah.
And what single sign-on means, you've signed in once with your face, and now you're trusted to be able to go in and open those specific apps.
Wow.
And then if you want to go to some third-party website or some third-party app, they might push you a code and say, punch in this 6-digit code to verify that you are the person with a second device that's trying to access this website or service.
Wow.
So if you combine those three things, that face scan, that's biometrics. So it could be your face, could be your fingerprint, could be your voice, and then the single sign-on and then multi-factor authentication. Boom, we have passwordless authentication, and that's way more secure than anything you could ever do with passwords, which can be hacked and they can be guessed and they can be breached, and you can have key logging software and surveillance technologies. So you're way more secure without passwords than with them. So the research we've done quite recently, we wanted to understand what's happening with this new modern hybrid workforce, as we come out of the pandemic. And we found some big differences across the generations. And Gen Z is a really interesting bunch. They're fascinating. So they're 21 to 24 years old. They're just hitting the workforce now. And we think it's now June. And so May, there was a whole bunch of people who graduated, and they're probably starting their first jobs. And then next year, there'll be more and more. They've got more passwords than any other generation, which is kind of crazy.
Wow.
But they bring along all these personal passwords that they've had for all their social accounts and gaming accounts and streaming accounts and budgeting accounts and all that. So they're bringing a whole bunch of personal passwords. And then they go into the workforce, and very quickly, they acquire more passwords than any other generation, which is amazing. Because Gen Z is only in the workforce, a short time, and they seem to have more passwords than people who've been in the workforce 10, 20, 30, 40 years.
Wow.
And part of it is that they're really tech savvy. They're really tech smart. And so they're signing up for this and that, and they've got all sorts of accounts and subscriptions. And they're in a situation now very quickly where they have the most passwords to deal with. And sadly, they are the most vulnerable because of their habits and what they do with their passwords. So in our research, we studied something we call password hygiene, which is how you construct your passwords and where you save them and what you do with them. And I'll tell you something crazy. This was research done by the BBC over in the UK. They did some big research, and they found that 15% of people in the UK use their pet's name as the basis of their password.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure that would never happen here in the US. But, they take the pet's name and they add a season or a month to it. So it might be Rover Spring 52 or something like that. And then 6% of the British population use the word password as their password.
Whoa,
exactly. So you've got some crazy things going on in society today, how people, they've got too many passwords, they're overloaded. And when they're trying to create a new one in a hurry, it's easy to just think of the dog's name or do something really lazy. And then we know from the research as well that about 31% of people write their work passwords in a personal notebook. So work passwords in a personal notebook.
Wow.
And then about 25% of people put their work passwords on an app on their personal smartphone. And another 20% put their work passwords on an Excel spreadsheet. So people are not using password management tools or password management technologies, which puts all of us at risk. And so password hygiene, is a problem across all generations. It's a huge problem for Gen Z because they have the most passwords and they don't know what to do with them or how to manage them. Gen Z do not understand, and I'll tell you why. Gen Z is the only generation alive with no recollection of 9/11. Wow. So all of us, our generation, we remember where we were, who we were with, what we were doing at the exact moment of 9/11 when we heard about it. And it had a profound impact on us. And for the next 20 years, we saw the world change And we saw security become this huge consideration, not just when you're going through airports, but your personal security, security for the country. Security became a huge thing over the 20 years after 9/11, except Gen Z.
Jeez.
They were probably running around the kitchen in nappies. They had no idea what was going on. And they sauntered through the next 20 years, kind of oblivious to what we went through. And then they got educated and they left the education system and they entered the workforce during a pandemic, working remotely for people they'd never met in many cases. And so security does not mean the same to them as it means to us. It doesn't mean the same. And we know that for a fact now because we've surveyed them and asked them a whole bunch of questions around how often they've seen a security policy at work. And a big portion tell us never. And it's because they just don't acknowledge it or see it or remember it or recall it. And we've asked them things like, how often do you receive security awareness training at work? Never. It doesn't register. But then when we ask them a different question, we say, how often do you notice or do you see privacy policies at work? Oh my God, we get a completely different answer.
Wow.
Gen Z sees privacy and actually reads the fine print of privacy policies in the way our generation doesn't.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm Gen X. Privacy kind of goes over our heads, but Gen Z absolutely is dialed into privacy.
Wow.
Which is really interesting because they share their whole lives on social media all day, every day.
Oh man.
But they seem to do it in a way that they understand what they're doing and they agree to share their lives. And then our generation's a bit different in that we're a bit more reluctant to share, and we're not as cognizant of privacy, but security is a big deal for us. Absolutely. Because we were impacted by 9/11.
That is so great. That is so great. It's some awesome information. And you said something because you talked about the pandemic and you talked about the workforce and you talked about the Gen Zs. They just graduated school, some just graduating college.
Yeah.
And in the middle of a pandemic, they're working, some of them, their first serious career job. So they're working their career job, but they're working from home. But now here we are in 2022, most companies want to go back to the old way. What is your thought on that? And do you have any research behind that?
We do. That's a huge topic. So let me break it down into a couple of parts.
Okay.
Part of our research, we asked people a very simple question. We said, where do you do your best work and feel most productive? And we were shocked by the answer because all generations and all industries told us they feel more productive in the office. Not what we expected, because if we read mainstream media for the last 2 years and listen to mainstream conversation, it would tell us everybody wants to work at home. But no, the data tells us people feel more productive in the office. And there were some other questions around that topic. And when we dig into the data and try and understand it and make sense of it, we think what it's really telling us is that people miss the sense of belonging. They miss the sense of context that comes with an office environment.
Wow.
And in particular, if you think about Gen Z, so you just said it before, they've joined this organization during the pandemic. They were working remotely. Yeah. And in many cases, they did not know what it was like to work in an office environment with other people. They just never did that because they went from school to high school to university and into this remote job. So they don't know what it's like to go to work and meet a bunch of people and have lunch together and have coffee and maybe go for beers on a Friday. And what happens in the office culture is you get to know people in other departments or other parts of the company or other parts of the business. And you have all these loose links. And what they give you is context. You get this sense of understanding what your organization does, where it's going, what it stands for. You get a sense of belonging. You know, I work here, I belong here, I understand this place. I'm part of the fabric of this organization, this culture. Now, if you only work remotely in your home office and stare at the same few people on a screen, you don't have that contextual connection with the rest of the organization. Wow. And all the other social cues that go with that. Yeah. And so Gen Z is in that situation now where they need to come out of the embryo to a certain extent, and to some extent engage with the workforce. And if they don't, we think what will happen is it'll be unavoidable. We'll continue to see massive churn. We'll see people realize that changing jobs simply means I put my current laptop in a FedEx bag and I ship it off, and I open a different FedEx bag and I take out a new laptop and I sign into that. But I plug it into the same two monitors on my same old desk and I sit on the same seat and I just work for a different company and probably get paid more. But I don't have to move my butt from the same seat. That's changing jobs in today's era. And it's so easy, and the barrier is so low to change.
Wow. Working at home versus working in the office. Even my experience in the corporate world, some great relationships, not because just solely on my skills or what I know, but my personality, the energy that I bring to the atmosphere. People begin to like Cedric. Well, I mean, the skill is important, but the personality is huge. Yes. And in the corporate world, my personality is what got me through. And I'm listening. I'm like, man, I can see how opportunities can be passed over because of the lack of relationships.
I think that will be the key determinant of the career trajectory for Gen Z, will be their ability to form relationships, not just the direct relationship with the boss or the immediate colleagues, but the broader relationship in the organization. And I think we are going to see a partial return to the office. Like in my company, we're doing a Monday, Wednesday, Friday routine. And then Tuesday and Thursday, we stay at home and just power through a whole bunch of work. And every company will come up with their own formula for doing this. But the energy happens for us. The energy transfer and the energy creation happens on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then the real productive stuff happens in between. People choose how they work. But I see that the energy gets created in the days we're together. And if we need to brainstorm on something or come up with something new or note out a difficult problem, there's nothing that beats standing around a whiteboard and having a good old-fashioned debate and grabbing the marker off each other and you know, all that energy and interaction that happens when people collide to achieve something together. It's really hard to replicate that through digital tools. It is an experience that there is magic, and we can look back now with a bit of nostalgia, you know, to how it used to be. But there's a couple of hidden bombs in this as well, because we think about what's going to happen next, and we think employers can go in one or two directions. And first, there's one other thing I didn't share with you about the research. The research showed that Gen Z is actually driving something called shadow IT. And shadow IT means people are using devices and tools and applications and technology that was not provided to them by their company. So they're using personal devices, personal cloud applications, personal services, external storage, and effectively putting their organization at risk because they may have customer data or patient data or student data. And it's a phenomenon that's been around for a long time in IT and in companies, but it's getting worse. And it's being driven or accelerated by two groups, remote workers and Gen Z. And when you combine the two together, it's out of control.
Yes.
And so there's a reason for it. It's because Gen Z just came out of the university system and they're super comfortable using G Suite and G Drive and Dropbox and all that technology. And then they come into a professional workplace and they're told, now you got to use Windows. And now you got to use Office applications and Teams and all that. And we have all these restrictions and you can't send large emails. And so when you put those people under pressure and they have to do something like transfer a large file to an external organization, they're going to fall back on what they know. And so that's where we see, you know, corporates using Dropbox, even though it's not a sanctioned application, or they're using Gmail when they shouldn't. And so that whole concept of shadow IT is a problem because, you know, organizations are being ransomed, they're being hacked, they're being compromised, and they don't want to make sure their data is not leaking outside in places like G Drive and Dropbox and all the rest of it. Organizations are now looking at Gen Z and they have to figure out, what do we do? Because they can see the password problem, they can see the shadow IT problem, and they can see that Gen Z does not take security very seriously for the reasons we talked about before. So if you're a leader in a company and you're looking at this and you go, oh my God, what are we going to do? Are we going to tighten everything up and lock things down and clamp down all our security and tell these kids what they can and can't do?
Yeah.
Is that the approach you're going to take? Because that would be quite a natural human reaction.
No.
Or do you take the opposite approach and say, hey, we actually need to learn to love Gen Z because we need staff and we need new teachers and we need nurses and we need servers and we need drivers. And, we just desperately need to bring Gen Z into the workforce. How do we embrace them? And how do we morph our workplace to suit their needs and expectations and skills and tooling to make sure that we harness them without putting ourselves at risk? So I see organizations are going to be in a very interesting dilemma once they figure out what's going on here.
Some solutions to this ongoing and this future problem.
Passwordless is part of the solution. We talked about that before. That's absolutely part of it. There's another one that's very exciting, and it's this idea of zero touch provisioning. So you think about somebody joining the organization, and this happened to Gen Z during the workforce. On average, it took about 3 days to get them set up with their laptop and their software, and it required 3 interactions with IT. It was very, very painful. That can be done in minutes or in a couple of hours, and it needs to be, because Gen Z's worldview is quite interesting. 71% of Gen Z think other companies are doing a better job with technology than their own company. That's their perception. They think 71% think the grass is greener elsewhere. Now, they don't know that because they've only worked in one organization. This is their first job for most of them. But they think their own company is doing a horrible job with setting up their technology and supporting them. And they think other companies are doing a better job. So again, if you're a leader in an organization and you're thinking about tightening up and clamping down, there's a very good chance you're going to drive these people away. Because if you create friction and force them to do more security measures, more VPNs, more passwords, more controls, these young workers are going to say, I can get a better job and have less of this drama elsewhere and probably get paid more and still sit at the same desk and connect to my same 2 monitors, and life's good.
Oh, Dennis, it's with this information, we're listening, and this can definitely, when you're talking about, onboarding new employees, and then once you get that employee trained up, what can companies do to attract and then retain great talent?
I think it comes down to removing friction. Because what I was alluding to before was, the temptation to increase controls for this generation of workers. That will add friction. If we are deliberate in saying we're going to remove friction and we're going to remove the need for them to be in the office 5 days a week, remove the need for them to pay for overpriced parking or overpriced lunches in the workplace, but give them choices and give them the tools that make them productive and invest in the tools that allow for modern collaboration. And also, one really important psychological thing is we need to provide psychological safety to Gen Z. And that's something that concerns me. The reason I raise this is I can still recall, and you can possibly recall, the conversation about 20 years ago about millennials was unkind. So I remember going to conferences and going to events and hearing a lot of unkind conversations about millennials.
Absolutely.
And they were perceived as a problem generation. That didn't make them feel good. It probably alienated them. And if we now stop and pause and think, who has built the digital infrastructure that runs our lives now? Who built Google? Who built Facebook? Who built Twitter? Who built, I could go on and on. It was the millennial generation.
Absolutely.
What they have done is amazing. And I'm really hoping that we don't culturally alienate Gen Z and limit their creativity, because they're going to do amazing things. I can't predict what, but they are going to do amazing things in the way the millennials did amazing things. And we need to make sure we don't vilify them and make them feel like they're the problem, because they're coming into a legacy infrastructure, legacy thinking, legacy tools, legacy processes in today's workplace.
Wow. I love this. Dennis. This is really great information that you are giving to the Lead to Greatness community on today. This is really a lot of helpful information. So I think one of the problems is understanding the generation, because if you don't understand the generation, guaranteed that you're going to do something or say something to offend because of what you don't understand. So what are some resources? What are something that we can do as a people to really begin to understand Gen Zs in the workforce?
So I love the fact that you started that with the listening and the understanding, because I think that's the piece that is missing to a certain extent today.
Mm.
We do need to listen and understand this generation because they are different, and lean into that difference and lean into the fact that their worldview is different. So I think that my advice is, you can go and read and research on Gen Z, but I would say just talk to them, just get to know them, because the best predictor of the future for any company and any organization is understanding Gen Z.
Yeah.
Because a whole wave of them just came in May, and another wave next May, and the following May, and the following May.
Yeah.
So over the next 5 years, Gen Z will flood the workforce.
Yeah.
And then they'll start to be promoted into managers and then leaders. Meanwhile, we're getting older, right?
Yeah.
And so this young generation is going to become the dominant cohort in the workforce.
Yes.
So the more we understand them and listen to them and truly empathize with them, the better we can predict the future and build a workforce that's going to be a really attractive one for them. So I can't emphasize enough how much there is to learn by understanding this incoming generation.
Wow, Dennis, that is a knowledge bomb. Wow, this is so amazing. And I love this. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I think we all need to just take a moment and listen to what Dennis just said, building relationships with Gen Zs. Because Dennis, you said this and I'm thinking about it. Not only is the Gen Zs part of the workforce, but they're going to be clients. They're going to be customers. And if you don't understand them, you're going to run out of business.
Well, they might also be your boss. I mean, it's quite likely that some of our generation, before we retire, our boss will be somebody who will then be in their 30s or early 40s. They might be a Gen Z person. And so they will eventually lead and shape the workforce in the way the millennials are now leading and shaping the workforce. So we need to learn to love them. We absolutely need to lean into them. And then, what's really encouraging about Gen Z is their financial skills are great. So they looked at previous generations and they seem to have learned from them in some way, but Gen Z spending habits are closer to baby boomer spending habits than all the excessive spending of the millennials in between. And so if we give Gen Z financial responsibility and say, you manage this budget, or here's a quota for you if you're in a sales role, or here's what you need, here are the numbers you need to manage to, they get it. They understand that. And so we can empower them and we can trust them.
Wow. Another knowledge bomb. Dennis, I really thank you. I personally want to thank you for this, because this information, for those who take heed and listen to what Dennis is talking about on today, because I am all ears, and I'm definitely going to make an assignment. If I can leave an action step on today, is get to know the Gen Zs, get to know them, ask questions, take them out to lunch. I mean, really get to know this generation so you can be on top of the game in your organization, in leadership, productivity, in your business, in every aspect of your life, because they are the people of tomorrow. They're going to be the ones when we retire. They're going to be the ones taking care of us, right? Yeah. So we want to make sure we take care of them right now. What are some leadership growth tips, tools, and advice that you can share with the Lead to Greatness community to help us reach our greatest potential?
I'm going to recommend 2 books that are not business books, right? Because everyone hears too much about the same business books. I'm going to recommend 2 books that I loved and I learned a lot from. The first one is called The Last Place on Earth, and it's a race to the South Pole back in 1909 between 2 different parties, one that was supremely well prepared and very humble, and the other was badly prepared and very arrogant. And the book lays out the story that is just, it's phenomenal. And the second one is also about the South Pole. It's called Endurance, and it's the mission down there and the ship that got shipwrecked, and then how the crew survived and were rescued. Both books are mind-bending. When you think about the leadership qualities those people had with no technology and no communication, and how they led other people through adversity, they're both profoundly influential books, in my opinion.
Dennis, thank you for sharing mind-shifting, mind-blowing thoughts for us leaders and entrepreneurs and business startups to think about as we move forward in the future. If someone wanted to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
I'm on LinkedIn, Denis with one N, Denis O'Shea, O-S-H-E-A. I'm not on any other social platforms. I'm a social Neanderthal. And my company is Mobile Mentor. So it's mobile-mentor.com. So that's our company, and we help organizations get this balance right. Security and employee experience.
Awesome. If someone worked with you as a client and received your services, what can they expect?
They'll expect a really good, honest interaction with us. We've got deep expertise. We're very narrow in what we do, and we're trying to be the best in the world. We are currently Microsoft's Global Partner of the Year for the work we do around securing our clients and giving them a great experience. And so we're narrow, we're really focused, we're experts at what we do, and trying to be the best in the world. We've been on this journey for 18 years, and it'll take us many, many more years, but we're enjoying the journey.
Wow, Dennis, thank you for everything that you are doing for the world, for the security of our safety with our personal and our business information. On behalf of the Lead to Greatness community, I want to thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us all.
Thank you for the opportunity. I love your podcast and what you do and giving people a podium and an opportunity and a voice. So thank you, Cedric. I really appreciate it.
And don't forget to subscribe to Lead to Greatness if this is your first time. And this podcast was helpful to you, leave a big thumbs up. And also, I want you to check out our Marriage Coach podcast, the podcast with my wife and I. If you're on iTunes, please rate this podcast and leave a review and help get the word out. Again, thank you, Lead to Greatness Nation, for joining us on today. Looking forward to seeing you again on next week. Till then, remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Peace. We out.